The influence of the Western environment on the participant Muslims is unmistakable in how these Muslims perceive religion. For them, Islam has become somewhat private within the secular environment of the West. For them, there is no emphasis on the political dimension of Islam, such as establishing an Islamic state or adopting Islamist slogans like Islam is a religion and a state. For these participant Muslims, Islam is centered on one's relationship with God and with other human beings. For them, Islam is not seen as an ideological tool or a comprehensive system of law and politics. Although it is important to add that these Muslims are not detached from politics. Participating in the political process of their countries is seen as following the commandments of the Quran to participate in community life and development. Their emphasis, however, is often on what the individual can do in terms of rituals, values, and norms. Some might refer to this as privatization of religion. This privatization of religion, so to speak, is a significant development in which religion has become less dominated by law, politics, ideology, or local orthodoxies. Consequently, a more enlightened, liberal, and an indigenous Islam is in the making. Given that this category of Muslims are not bound by particular legal or theological schools of Islam, they free themselves from earlier theological juristic opinions held in a particular school. They do not see it as necessary to be labeled as Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, Salafi, Wahhabi, Sunni, or Shia. For them, the label Muslim is sufficient. These participant Muslims are also assertive in how they approach the textual traditions of Islam, the Holy Quran and Hadith, or traditions of the Prophet. They believe it is possible to read the foundation texts of Islam, the Quran and Hadith, for example, in translation in English, Arabic, in Urdu, French, German, etc. This is a major shift from the long-held belief that one has to rely on the Quran in Arabic in order to understand its meaning, and that translations should not be relied upon. These Muslims are reluctant to accept intermediaries between the individual and the texts. Participant Muslims reject the idea that one cannot be fully Muslim unless one is ruled by Islamic law, not secular law. They do not make a sharp distinction between Islamic law and secular law in their daily lives. Provided laws support notions such as justice, equity, equality, and public interest, these participant Muslims will respect those laws as Islamic in intention or essence. Participant Muslims argue that even in the so-called Islamic countries, for example Malaysia or Indonesia, most of the laws in force in the country are not necessarily based on the foundation texts of Islam, the Quran and Hadith. Much of the laws in place are not very different to the laws in force in Western countries. Although these Western laws might be labeled secular, to participant Muslims they are not un-Islamic, so long as they are in accord with core Islamic values such as justice, equity, equality and fairness. Thus, from the participant Muslims' point of view, the distinction between so-called secular law and Islamic law becomes blurred. Participant Muslims take abiding by the laws in the countries of which they are citizens seriously and consider that as part of being obedient to God. Respect and obedience to the laws of the land, even though the authorities may not be Muslim, was also emphasized by a number of classical Muslim jurists in their writings. Difficulties primarily arise if laws prohibit fundamental Islamic beliefs or practices such as prayer, fasting and zakat. But such laws don't exist in Western countries. Difficulties also arise in relation to certain laws that permit things like gambling, prostitution or alcohol. But these laws for the participant Muslims are not considered problematic because such laws do not oblige Muslims to engage in those practices. So for all practical purposes, these laws don't exist. Relying on a range of concepts and taking into consideration their circumstances in the West, these participant Muslims reject pre-modern concepts such as Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam, Dar al-Harb being the abode of war, Dar al-Islam meaning the abode of Islam. These concepts divide the world into us and them, the world of Islam and the world of the infidel. Participant Muslims believe that such labels are obsolete in discussing today's political entities such as nation states, membership of which is not based on religious affiliation. Tariq Ramadan, a theoretician of what he calls European Islam, argues that there are 5 fundamental rights that are secured in European or Western societies: the right to practice Islam, the right to knowledge, the right to found organizations, the right to autonomous representation, and the right to appeal to law. Where these rights exist, he argues, that place should be considered Dar al-Islam or an abode of Islam. For these participant Muslims, citizenship is a contract, the terms of which Muslims are obliged to honor, including obeying all the laws in force in the country, paying taxes, and contributing to the well-being of the country. As far as social relations are concerned, Muslims must deal with all people, regardless of their faiths, on the basis of honesty, trustworthiness, and justice.